Please put your hands together for Ashley Manning.
Hello, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Anya Gallagher. So hello, my name is Ashley Manning. I have just completed a BA in English and Celtic Civilizations in UCC. Basically, I have been reading books and watching films for 3 years, and they've given me a degree for that. So I've been looking at literature, all forms of literature, from Netflix original series, blockbuster films, novels from the 18th century, William Shakespeare's plays in the 16th century, tales of high kings in the 12th century, and the odd few lines written on home stones in the 1st century AD. And I've been looking at some of the ways in which these forms of literature have been influenced and informed by other literature. You'd be amazed at how similar Cuchulainn and Luke Skywalker are when you get down to the nitty-gritty. I mean, really, the only difference is that one has a lightsaber and the other has a Hurley. I'm also a comedian. I have my own literary output, and my literature has its own influences and is informed by other literature as well. So in 1968, a man called Roland Barthes wrote an essay called The Death of the Author. And in that, he defined the text, any piece of writing, as a multi-dimensional space in which a variety of writings, none of which are original, blend and clash together. Basically, he was saying that we don't create literature, we are constantly just reusing and recycling other literature, other language, ideas and stories that have come before us. And he also claimed that the truth of writing is that the author has, his only power is to mix writings. They're eternal copyists. And all of this, like, the reason I'm telling you is just to justify, it's just a highfalutin way of justifying the fact that I occasionally try and steal other comedians' jokes. So, naturally, when we talk about literature, we think about masturbating. Or maybe that's just me and my kind of weird fetishes, I don't know. I don't have a degree in masturbation, but I have done an extensive amount of research, practical research, and I've also done some reading research. And what I found is that literature, and by literature I mean porn, tends to depict women and female masturbation in a certain way. Very often it's these beautiful women, and they're all very spontaneous and excited about the whole thing, and it's very aesthetically pleasing. But the reality is not quite like that. You're kind of hunched over, grunting a little bit, dragging yourself along the carpet to get that sweet spot. It's kind of like when your dog has worms. Yeah. But there's two things happening when women are depicted in the ways that I initially described. The first is that they are being thingified, they're being turned into sexual objects. And the second is that those objects are being given more value than real women and the real woman experience. But this isn't a new thing, this isn't just something that came out of porn. In 10th century Irish literature, there was a common theme across the literature known as the sovereignty goddess. And what this basically was is that the land of Ireland was symbolized as a woman, and the king would have to sleep with that woman in order to verify or validate his rulership over the land. So she's a sexual object. She's one of the three things that a king needed to be a king, along with a cloak and a chariot. But I'm not, I haven't studied feminist literature, I haven't studied feminist critical theory, I haven't really studied feminism at all. But feminism is a huge part of my current social climate, it's a part of my everyday life. So it is going to influence what I write in my comedy. But feminism didn't exist in 10th century Ireland at all. And yet I've just given you guys what would be considered a feminist critique of a 10th century text. So I have found a meaning in that text that the author surely could not have meant to have had in it. Unless, if he did, he was really progressive. Not progressive enough to let women learn to write for themselves, but progressive in his own way, I guess. And Roland Barthes, in the same essay that I mentioned earlier, he said that when we are reading a text and studying a text, we tend to try and find too much meaning in the author. We look for the explanation of his writing in the author. We look at his life and how he lived and who he was as a person to see if we can figure out why he wrote what he wrote. This forms the entire basis of Leaving Cert English. Sylvia Plath wrote this depressing poem because her life was terrible and she was really just thinking about sticking her head in the oven. So something we're all familiar with, but when we do this, we're putting a limit on the potential meaning of the words in the text. We're simplifying it too much and taking something away from the language. Roland Barthes also commented that it is language which speaks, not the author. So at a certain point, once the text has been written, once it has been uttered, the author no longer has any control over it or any influence on how it might be interpreted. So I guess if I'm applying that to my comedy, if I'm the author of my comedy, then every time I get on stage, regardless of how many laughs I might get, I die every time. Because in a sense, that's what's happening. The author dies once the text has come to fruition. And I've lost my words. Dying. So I die. And so in 1968, Roland Barthes presented The Death of the Author. And I guess what I'm trying to do today is present the death of the comedian. Basically, I'm just stealing another person's work once again. That's all for me. Thank you very much.